He-Jin Kim was fixing a broken quantum communication device when the aliens arrived. She didn't notice them at first, too busy soldering wires in her small lab at the Korean Advanced Science Institute. The rain outside was heavy, typical for Seoul in spring, and thunder shook the building's windows. The first sign that something was different came when her equipment started working perfectly, too perfectly. The quantum signal strength jumped to levels she had never seen before. He-Jin adjusted her safety glasses and checked the readings again. The numbers didn't make sense. "That's impossible," she said to herself, tapping the display screen. The signal shouldn't be this strong, not with Earth's technology. She was about to reset the system when all the lights in her lab turned green. A soft humming filled the room. The air began to shimmer in the center of her lab, right next to her favorite coffee mug. He-Jin stood very still as the shimmer turned into a tall, transparent cylinder of light. Inside the cylinder, 3 figures appeared. They weren't human. Their bodies were tall and thin, with skin that looked like polished pearl. They had 4 arms each, and their eyes were large and purple. They wore what looked like floating pieces of silver metal around their bodies. He-Jin's first thought wasn't about their alien appearance. Instead, she noticed that their teleportation technology was using quantum fields similar to her research. Her second thought was that she should probably say hello. "Welcome to Earth," she said calmly, putting down her soldering iron. "Would you like some coffee?" The aliens looked at each other, then at her. They seemed surprised, but not by her offer of coffee. One of them held up a device that looked like a silver ball. It spoke in a musical voice, and the ball translated. "You are not afraid. We expected more panic from inhabitants of a Class 12 death world." He-Jin picked up her coffee mug and took a sip. "Should I be afraid? You're using a quantum field harmonizer for your teleporter. That's very advanced, but not dangerous if properly controlled. Though I'm curious about how you managed to stabilize the field at this scale." Now the aliens looked even more surprised. The one in the middle stepped forward. "I am First Observer Nehru. We detected your quantum experiments and came to investigate. We did not expect to find this." "Find what?" He-Jin asked, genuinely curious. "A being from a death world who understands quantum physics," Nehru said. "Your planet has gravity 1.3 times higher than standard. Your weather includes acid rain. Your tectonics are unstable. Your wildlife is aggressive. Your atmosphere has corrosive oxygen. Yet here you are, working with quantum mechanics as if discussing the weather." Thunder boomed outside, making the aliens jump. He-Jin just smiled. "The weather is actually quite nice today. Would you like to see my research? I've been working on using quantum fields for faster-than-light communication. From your teleporter, I can see you've solved some of the problems I've been struggling with." The third alien spoke to Nehru in their musical language. The translator ball hummed. "First Observer, this cannot be normal behavior for a Deathworlder. She should be displaying survival instincts, aggression, or fear." He-Jin laughed softly. "Why would I be aggressive? You're clearly more advanced than us, and you're interested in science. On Earth, we call that a learning opportunity." She walked to her computer and pulled up her research data. "Now, about those quantum fields, I have some questions about how you handle a phase variance." The aliens gathered around her computer, their initial shock turning to interest as He-Jin explained her work. Outside, the storm continued, but nobody in the lab paid attention to it anymore. They were too busy discussing quantum physics. That was how humanity's first official contact with the Galactic Council began, not with fear or violence, but with a Korean engineer offering coffee and asking questions about quantum mechanics. It would set the tone for everything that followed, though nobody knew it at the time. Do Young Park had seen many strange things during his time with the Galactic Council, but Earth was different. The Council had sent him to assess Earth's technology level, but what he found confused him more each day. He sat in his observation pod, watching through the window as construction crews built a seawall in Busan. The massive structure was designed to protect the city from rising ocean levels and stronger storms. What fascinated him wasn't the wall itself, but how humans kept changing their plans as they built it. "You see, we found a better way to anchor the supports," explained Chief Engineer Hee-jin Kim, who had become his guide on Earth. She pointed to the workers below. "When the ocean floor wasn't stable enough, we didn't look for a different location. We created a new foundation system instead." Do-young made notes on his tablet, but that's not how other species handle such problems. Most would search for a more suitable location. Hee-jin smiled. "That would mean moving the city. We prefer to solve the problem instead." Throughout the day, Do-young saw more examples of this strange approach. Humans didn't just adapt to their environment. They changed it to suit their needs. When they visited a water treatment plant, he watched in amazement as they turned polluted water into something clean enough to drink. "Your species takes such risks," he said, watching the complex filtration system. "Many worlds would simply avoid polluted water sources. We can't avoid problems when we cause them," Hee-jin replied. "So we learned to fix them instead." The most surprising visit was to an underground farm. Humans had turned old subway tunnels into growing spaces, using artificial lights and vertical farming techniques. The air was cool and clean, and plants grew in neat rows along the walls. "You create new environments inside your existing ones," Do-young observed. "Why not just grow food in natural conditions?" A farmer named Ta Hyun-cho answered while checking the hydroponic systems. "Natural conditions change too much. Down here, we control everything. We can grow food all year, no matter what happens on the surface." Do-young's report to the council grew longer each day. He wrote about how humans built cities in deserts by creating water from air. He described their weather control systems and their plans to clean the oceans. Each project showed the same pattern. Instead of avoiding problems, humans engineered solutions. On his last day, he visited Hee-jin's quantum lab again. She was already working on improvements based on what she had learned from the first contact team. "I think I understand now," he said, watching her work. "Other species see a hostile world and learn to survive in it. Humans see a hostile world and decide to remake it." Hee-jin looked up from her work. "Is that unusual? When something doesn't work, you fix it. When you need something that doesn't exist, you create it. That's what engineers do." Do-young finished his report that evening. He wrote, "Earth's classification as a death world is correct, but our understanding of its people is wrong. We assumed that living on such a dangerous planet would create a species focused on survival. Instead, it created a species of engineers who see every problem as something to be solved, every barrier as something to be rebuilt, and every limitation as a challenge to overcome." He sent the report to the council with a recommendation. Earth shouldn't be isolated like other death worlds. Its people had too much to teach the galaxy about solving problems in new ways. As his ship left Earth's atmosphere, Do-young watched the blue planet grow smaller. Somewhere down there, humans were probably inventing new ways to change their world. He wondered what they would create next. Ji-woo Lee had worked as the Galactic Hub Station's chief engineer for 5 years. She had never seen the reactor's warning lights turn this color before. The massive screen in front of her showed red indicators spreading across the station's power grid like a virus. "Status report," she commanded, her voice steady despite her concern. The alien technicians around her moved quickly, their 4 arms working multiple controls at once. "Primary reactor containment is failing," one technician reported. "Energy levels are rising beyond safety limits. Standard containment protocols are not working." The Galactic Hub Station was the pride of the Council, a massive space station where species from across the galaxy came together. Right now, it held over 50,000 beings from 30 different worlds. If the reactor failed, none of them would survive. Ji-woo checked the readings again. The situation was worse than she had first thought. The reactor wasn't just malfunctioning. It was starting a cascade failure. They had less than 6 hours before it would reach critical levels. "Contact the council," she ordered. "We need to begin evacuation procedures." But she knew evacuation wouldn't be enough. Even if they could get everyone off the station, an exploding reactor would destroy centuries of scientific knowledge and diplomatic progress. There had to be another way. That's when she remembered the Earth engineering team. They had arrived last week to study the station's technology. Their presence had made many council members nervous. Humans weren't supposed to be this far from their death world. But right now, Ji-woo didn't care about politics. "Get me Engineer Kim," she said. "The human one." Minutes later, Jin Kim arrived at the control room. She took one look at the readings and asked, "Have you tried shutting it down?" "A full shutdown would take 12 hours, Ji-woo explained. "We don't have that much time." Jin studied the reactor diagrams carefully. "Then we don't shut it down. We redirect it." The other engineers in the room stared at her. "Redirect a failing reactor?" One asked. "That's not in any safety protocol." "Exactly," Jin said. "Because it's not safe. But neither is letting it explode." She turned to Ji-woo. "On Earth, we have a saying. Sometimes you have to break something to fix it. Let me call my team." Ji-woo looked at the warning lights, then at the evacuation plans, and finally at Jin's confident expression. She made her decision. Do it. Within minutes, more humans arrived. They carried tools and equipment Ji-woo had never seen before. Jin quickly explained her plan. They would use the station's backup systems in ways they were never designed for, creating a makeshift energy distribution network. "This goes against every safety regulation in the book," Ji-woo said, watching the humans work. "Safety regulations were written for safe situations," Jin replied as she rewired a control panel. "This isn't safe. This is an engineering problem. And on Earth, we solve problems." The next hour was the most stressful of Ji-woo's career. She watched as the humans took apart crucial systems and rebuilt them in new ways. They worked with a speed and confidence that seemed impossible, as if they had practiced for this exact situation. Maybe, she realized, they had. Their whole planet was one crisis after another. Every day on Earth was a lesson in emergency engineering. As the reactor's warning sounds grew louder, Ji-woo understood that she was about to witness either the greatest engineering success or the biggest disaster in Council history. And it all depended on a group of engineers from a planet that the galaxy had dismissed as too dangerous to matter. Ta-hyun Cho moved through the station's maintenance tunnels with practiced ease. Back on Earth, he had worked in disaster zones, fixing broken power plants and collapsed buildings. The Galactic Hub Station wasn't so different, just bigger and with more alien technology. "The main power lines run through here," he said, pointing at the glowing cables above them. His team followed close behind, carrying their modified tools. "We need to create a new path for the energy, like making a new river when the old one floods." Jin's voice came through their communicators. "The reactor's energy levels are still rising. We have 4 hours left. How long will your modifications take?" 3 hours, Ta-hyun replied. "Maybe less if everything goes well." "Which means it will take 5 hours. Jin said. "Nothing ever goes well in situations like this." Ta-hyun smiled. She was right, of course. That's why they always planned for things to go wrong. On Earth, they called it Murphy's Law. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. So they prepared for everything to fail. The alien engineers watched in horror as the humans began cutting into the station's power systems. To them, it looked like madness. The humans were breaking safety protocols, ignoring warning signs, and rebuilding critical systems while they were still running. "You can't modify live power systems," one of the alien engineers protested. "The energy feedback could kill you." "That's why we're using insulated tools," Ta-hyun explained calmly. He connected 2 power lines that were never meant to meet. Sparks flew, but the modified connections held. "On Earth, we often have to fix power plants during storms. You learn to work with live systems when you can't shut them down. The next 2 hours were a carefully controlled chaos. The humans split into teams, each working on a different part of their plan. Some created new power pathways. Others modified the station's cooling systems. A few even started building what they called emergency breakers from spare parts. Wu Li watched from the control room as the humans worked. Their approach to the problem was completely different from anything she had seen before. When they found a blocked passage, they didn't look for another route. They made a new one. When they needed tools that didn't exist, they built them. It's like watching water flow around rocks, she said to Hu Jin, who was coordinating the teams. You don't stop when you hit an obstacle. You just find a new way through. Or make one. He Jin replied. That's how we do things on Earth. Nature doesn't care about our plans, so we learn to adapt our plans to whatever happens. The station's warning systems kept blaring, but the humans ignored them. They had their own ways of measuring danger. Every team carried radiation detectors, heat sensors, and other tools they had brought from Earth. They trusted their instruments and their experience more than the station's automated warnings. As the 4th hour approached, Ta Hyun's team finished their final modifications. The new power distribution system looked nothing like the original design. It was a complex network of redirected energy flows, emergency shutoffs, and backup routes. It's not pretty, Ta Hyun said, looking at their work, but it doesn't need to be pretty. It just needs to work. Now came the hard part. They had built their solution, but would it be enough to save the station? As the reactor's energy levels continued to rise, they were about to find out. Min Soo Kang stood at the main control panel, his hands hovering over the emergency controls. Around him, both human and alien engineers watched the reactor's readings with intense focus. The modified power systems were ready, but no one had ever tried something like this before. All teams report ready. He Jin's voice came through the communication system. She had positioned herself near the reactor core, wanting to monitor the changes firsthand. Ta Hyun's modifications are complete. We can begin the power redistribution. Wu Li looked at the station's main display. The reactor's energy levels were now dangerously high. If this doesn't work, we have less than an hour before critical failure. It will work, Min Soo said with quiet confidence. But you might want to warn everyone to hold on to something. This will not be smooth. The plan was both simple and incredibly complex. They would use the station's modified systems to create controlled energy surges, like opening gates in a dam one at a time. Each surge would release some of the reactor's dangerous energy buildup, sending it through their newly built pathways. Beginning Phase 1, Min Soo announced. He pressed the first sequence of controls. The station shuddered as energy began flowing through the new pathways. Warning alarms blared even louder than before. The alien engineers watched in horror as system after system showed critical warnings. But the humans remained calm, watching their own instruments instead of the station's panic signals. Phase 1 successful, Ta Hyun reported from his position in the maintenance tunnels. Energy levels dropping in sections 3 through 7. Moving to Phase 2. The second phase was more dangerous. They needed to trigger small, controlled failures in some systems to protect the more critical ones. It went against everything the station's engineers had learned about safety, but the humans insisted it was necessary. Think of it like a controlled burn in a forest, He Jin had explained earlier. Sometimes you have to create small fires to prevent a bigger one. The station shook more violently as Phase 2 began. Lights flickered throughout the hub. In some sections, power went out completely, switching to emergency systems. But in the reactor core, the energy levels were finally starting to drop. It's working, Ji-woo said, watching the numbers fall. The energy is dispersing through the new pathways. Min Soo nodded, but kept his focus on the controls. We're not finished yet. The hardest part comes next. The final phase was the riskiest. They had to safely shut down their temporary systems without causing another energy spike. It was like dismantling a bomb while it was still ticking. He Jin supervised this phase personally, directing teams to shut down the emergency pathways one at a time. Each shutdown caused the station to tremor, but the reactor's energy levels continued to drop. After what felt like hours but was actually only 40 minutes, the reactor's readings returned to normal levels. The warning alarms finally fell silent. "Reactor stabilized," He Jin reported. Her voice sounded tired but satisfied. "All emergency systems functioning as intended. We can begin restoring normal power distribution." The alien engineers stared at their displays in disbelief. The humans had broken every safety protocol in the book, deliberately caused system failures, and rebuilt critical systems while they were still running. And somehow, it had worked. "How did you know this would work?" Jiwoo asked Min-Su as the emergency teams began their cleanup work. He smiled slightly. "We didn't. But on Earth, we learn to solve problems even when we're not sure of the solution. Sometimes, the only way to find out if something will work is to try it." The crisis was over, but its impact was just beginning. Throughout the station, word spread about how the humans had saved them all. The story would soon reach every corner of the galaxy, changing how everyone viewed the engineers from Earth. Do-Young Park watched the recorded footage of the reactor crisis for the third time. The council had called him back from Earth to review the incident, hoping his experience with humans would help them understand what had happened. The observation room was quiet as he studied the emergency teams in action. Other council members sat around him, their attention fixed on the screens showing multiple angles of the humans working. "Notice how they respond to problems," Do-Young said, pausing the footage. "When they find a blocked passage, they don't search for another route. They make a new one. When they need a tool that doesn't exist, they create it. This isn't just problem solving. This is innovation under pressure." One council member, their crystalline form reflecting the light from the screens, spoke up. "But they violated every safety protocol we had established. They deliberately caused system failures. How could they know this wouldn't make things worse?" "They didn't know," Do-Young replied. "That's what makes them different. On Earth, they can't always wait for perfect solutions. Their planet forces them to act quickly and adapt to changing situations." He showed them more footage, this time from Earth's history. Humans fixing nuclear reactors during disasters. Engineers building emergency bridges during floods. Teams converting factories to make medical equipment during health crises. "Look at their history," he continued. "Every disaster on Earth taught them something new. Every crisis forced them to innovate. They don't just survive their death world. They learn from it." The footage showed He Jin's team creating new power pathways in the station. Do-Young pointed out how they used techniques developed from Earth's natural disasters. "See how they redirect the energy. They learned that from controlling flood waters, the emergency breakers, adapted from earthquake safety systems." Another council member raised a concern. "But this approach seems dangerous. Reckless, even." "To us, yes," Do-Young agreed. "But for them, the most dangerous option is doing nothing. On Earth, standing still means death. Movement means survival. Innovation means progress." He showed them the final moments of the crisis, when the human solution worked. "We've been thinking about this wrong," he explained. "We saw Earth as a death world that created survivors. But it didn't create survivors. It created engineers. Every challenge on their planet taught them to solve problems in new ways." The council chamber fell silent as this idea sank in. Do-Young continued, "Think about it. High gravity taught them to build stronger structures. Earthquakes taught them about flexible design. Storms taught them to create robust power systems. Their whole planet is one big engineering classroom." He turned to face the council directly. "We've been asking the wrong question. We kept asking how humans survive on such a dangerous planet. We should have been asking what that planet taught them about solving problems." The footage ended with the reactor stabilizing. Do-Young made his final point. Humans don't just deal with problems. They learn from them. Every crisis makes them better engineers. Every failure teaches them something new. That's why they solved our reactor crisis in ways we never considered. As the council members discussed this new perspective, Du Young thought about He Jin and her team. They were probably already working on improvements to the station's systems, finding ways to prevent similar problems in the future. That's what Earth had taught them to do, not just fix problems, but learn from them. The galaxy would need to rethink its view of Earth and its people. They weren't just survivors from a death world. They were engineers shaped by a planet that never stopped teaching them new lessons. Chief Architect Yun Hee-song stood before the Galactic Council in their grand chamber. The walls sparkled with living crystals, and representatives from 100 worlds sat in rising tiers around her. She had come to explain humanity's engineering philosophy to the galaxy's leaders. "Let me tell you about Mount Baekdu," she began, showing images of the massive volcano. When it threatened to erupt 50 years ago, we didn't evacuate the region. Instead, we built a system to release the pressure safely. We turned a disaster into a power source. The council members watched as she showed them more examples from Earth. Each one demonstrated how humans had changed problems into solutions. "In Seoul, we didn't just build walls to stop flooding," she continued. "We created underground water storage that helps during droughts. In the Arctic, we didn't just adapt to the cold. We learned to use it for cooling our computers." A council member interrupted. "But why take such risks? Why not simply avoid dangerous areas?" Yun Hee smiled. "Where would we go? Earth is full of dangers. If we avoided every risk, we would have nowhere to live. So we learned to solve problems instead." She showed them the latest designs for the Galactic Hub Station. After the reactor crisis, the Council had asked for human help to improve the station's systems. Yun Hee's team had reimagined its entire power grid. "Look at how we've redesigned the reactor systems," she explained. "We're not just preventing another crisis. We're turning the station's power problems into advantages. The energy surges that almost destroyed the station. Now they help power the backup systems." The council chamber filled with surprised murmurs. This was not how other species approached engineering. They built systems to avoid problems. Humans built systems that turned problems into solutions. "On Earth, we have a saying," Yun Hee continued. "Necessity is the mother of invention. Every problem we face teaches us something new. Every crisis makes us better engineers." She showed them plans for new projects across the galaxy. Human engineers were helping other worlds deal with their own challenges. They brought with them not just technical skills, but a new way of thinking about problems. "We don't see a hostile universe that needs to be survived," she said. "We see an universe full of engineering opportunities. Every problem is a chance to learn something new. Every challenge is a chance to build something better." The council's chief administrator stood up. "We are beginning to understand. Your planet's harshness didn't just make you strong. It made you creative, innovative." "Exactly," Yun Hee agreed. "Earth taught us that surviving isn't enough. We need to understand our challenges, learn from them, and use them to build better solutions." As she finished her presentation, Yun Hee knew that the galaxy's view of Earth was changing. They no longer saw just a dangerous death world. They saw a place that had created a special kind of engineer, one who could turn any problem into an opportunity. The council voted that day to create a new program. Engineers from across the galaxy would now train on Earth, learning not just how to survive challenges, but how to transform them into solutions. As Yun Hee left the chamber, she thought about all the young engineers who would soon visit Earth. They would learn what her people had always known, that the greatest innovations often come from the hardest challenges. 1 year after the reactor crisis, Ho Jin Kim stood in front of her new class at the Galactic Engineering Crisis Response Academy. The academy occupied a renovated building in Seoul, its windows overlooking the city's mix of ancient temples and modern towers. Students from 30 different worlds sat before her. Some floated in anti-gravity pods, others stood on multiple legs, and a few existed as fields of pure energy. All had come to Earth to learn how humans solved problems. "Welcome to Earth," He-Jin began. "You might have heard that this is a death world. That's true. But it's also the greatest engineering school in the galaxy." She showed them images of Earth's challenges: earthquakes, volcanoes, storms, and more. But alongside each danger, she showed a solution humans had created. "Today, we'll start with something simple," she said. "We're going to build an emergency shelter using only local materials. Then we'll test it against earthquake forces, flood conditions, and extreme temperatures. When it fails, and it will fail, we'll learn why and build it better." The alien students looked nervous. On their worlds, engineering meant careful planning and perfect execution. The idea of building something that might fail seemed wrong to them. "I know this seems strange," He-Jin continued. "You're used to getting things right the first time. But Earth doesn't give us that luxury. Here, we learn by doing, failing, and trying again." Do-Young Park, now the Academy's coordinator, watched from the back of the room. In the year since the reactor crisis, the galaxy's view of Earth had changed completely. The Council no longer saw humans as primitive Deathworlders. Instead, they recognized Earth as the galaxy's premier training ground for practical engineering. The Academy had grown quickly. Every major species sent their best engineers to learn Earth's methods. They learned not just technical skills, but a new way of thinking about problems. Tai-hyun ran the practical training programs, teaching students how to work with live systems and handle emergencies. Min-Soo taught rapid response techniques. Yun-Hee led classes on turning environmental challenges into engineering advantages. The Galactic Hub Station, once nearly destroyed, had become a model for human engineering principles. Its systems now included multiple redundancies and creative solutions inspired by Earth's natural disasters. Other stations across the galaxy were being upgraded with similar improvements. "Remember," He-Jin told her class, "engineering isn't about avoiding problems. It's about solving them. Every challenge is an opportunity to learn something new." She watched as her students began their first project. Some were hesitant, others eager. All of them were starting to understand what made human engineers different. Later that day, He-Jin met with the other instructors to plan future classes. They had requests from more worlds wanting to send students, and the Council was funding expansion of the Academy. "We've come a long way," Do-Young said, looking at the plans for new training facilities. "A year ago, most species thought humans were just lucky survivors on a dangerous planet. Now they understand," He-Jin replied. "Earth didn't make us survivors. It made us engineers. Every disaster taught us something new. Every challenge made us better." As night fell over Seoul, lights came on across the city. In labs and workshops throughout the Academy, students from across the galaxy worked on projects, solved problems, and learned to think like human engineers. They were learning Earth's greatest lesson, that the most dangerous challenges often lead to the best solutions. The legacy of the reactor crisis wasn't just about saving one station. It was about showing the galaxy a new way to solve problems. Earth's death world status, once seen as a curse, had become its greatest gift to the galaxy.